The gospel written by Apostle Matthew, chapter 5 and verse 33 onwards. So some of you who have been regular would know that we have been having a study of the scriptures, especially the teachings of Jesus, starting from Matthew chapter 5. Why are these important? If at all we read a particular passage every day, if we should read a passage every day, I think we need to be reading these passages, that is basically Matthew 5 to 7, because they are the concentrated teachings of Jesus. We call ourselves Christians, we call ourselves followers of Christ, and followers of Christ cannot follow him unless we know what he taught. And this is very true with today, because many of us, we think that we are Christians, we think that we know things, but unless we know Christ, we are not Christians, because we cannot, we cannot relate with him, we cannot follow him if we do not have a knowledge of his teachings, okay? So we need to give a lot of focus to this, because these are the ideals that Jesus taught his disciples. If you read Matthew chapter 5, the first verse, you would understand that as crowds of people were with Jesus, he went to a place, we went to the mountain where certain people who had the thirst to know more, they went along with him. The disciples especially, they wanted to know more. This crave in their hearts to know Jesus more and his ideals more and his principles more was what made Jesus to teach these things to him. And this is very essential for us to know these ones and follow these ones. If we don't have these values, we can never call ourselves kingdom people. So we have looked at many things like the Beatitudes, we looked at the salt and the light, we looked at what Jesus says about the law, right? And today we're going to look at chapter 5 verses 33 onwards. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. What is this vow? In the Old Testament, because it's a cultural thing basically, it was not taught by God that we need to make vows to God. It's a cultural thing because, you need to understand when God revealed himself to the Israelites, God revealed himself to Abraham. Abraham was still a product of his culture and his religious background. You understand that? So not everything has changed. God did not ask people to make vows. Today a lot of people do make vows, saying, what? A vow is basically a bargain, a deal that you make with God. What is that? You give me a job, I'll give you my hair. You give me a job, I'll put maybe 100 rupees into your offering. Okay? We make a deal. But in fact, vows we are not supposed to. In fact, the Bible does not condone, it does not teach vows, but the Israelites did it. But God was saying, Jesus is saying, because even in the Old Testament you have that, you don't have to make a vow, but if you make a vow, then you always need to keep it. What is Jesus saying? Can we make a vow to God? Is God going to benefit out of any of our vows that we make? Think about that. He is not going to benefit out of anything that you do. We need to understand that you can never do anything for God. We use the word, right? For God. What can you do for God? Tell me. Just think about one thing that you can do for God. Because he is already self-sufficient. He doesn't need anything. What can you even do for him? And even when you make a vow, Jesus says, you don't have to, but if you do, you don't go back on your word. So he is saying there is a worth for words. This is very important for us to understand because today we lose that worth for words. No, we say things that we don't do. Our words do not mean a thing anymore. We need to really understand. That is why James would say the tongue, even though it's the small organ, it is a very small organ, it has the capability of destroying lives. It can kindle a fire which can destroy lives. He is saying, be careful what you speak. Be very cautious because, economy of words is very important. Where do we have economy of words? Only when we text, we have economy of words, right? And this text language that we have, and certain psychologists say that we are actually becoming dumber by the day because we spoil a language which it had taken, millennia for languages to develop. And you know what? We would have guttural sounds now. You don't know that? Guttural sounds? If you read it, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like cave people. Cave people had guttural sounds. That's how they communicated, supposedly. And it took millennia for language to develop. And now, in one generation, we have gone back to the guttural sounds. Sometimes we think that we are economic with our words, and that only happens in your social media. But somehow, when it comes to life, we have so much of words that we put out which do not have any value at all. Jesus says, be careful before you speak. And he is not just talking about vows, which is per se, almost to God. He is also talking about do not break an oath. When you make a commitment to somebody, he says you keep it. And you're not supposed to swear, he goes on, says, right? But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. Why do you even swear? Why do you even swear? Right. I swear on the Bible that what I say is the truth. I swear on, God himself, right, that what I say is true. Why do you have to swear? Just think about that. James would talk about the same thing again. Why do you swear? Because people don't believe your words when you say something. And therefore, you have to bring in an extra guarantor, kind of. You don't believe me, but you believe that the Bible is true. And therefore, let me tell you that my credibility does not come from my words. My credibility does not come from my life. It comes from an external thing. You understand that? How is it even right? Okay? You don't believe me, but you believe somebody else. And therefore, on that person, I swear. It doesn't make any sense. People don't believe us because our words don't mean anything. Jesus says there is a worth for words. So let us be people, if at all we say something, that we will put it into action. If at all we commit something, that we will always be people who stick to that. We always have this, so when we talk to God and say, Lord, didn't you say that? Why are you not doing that? Especially about promises that we call out from the Bible. But somehow when it comes to us, we remind God that he said something and he has to do. But somehow our own words, they don't mean a thing even to our own selves, right? Yesterday I would have said something and today conveniently I would forget that, right? This is us. Jesus says, be careful with your words because your words should be trustworthy. People should be able to place credibility on who you are. And this comes not by lying, but by being truthful all the time. This is a characteristic of God, that he is called true, meaning there is no falsehood in him. What about us? Are we people who have things, inside and we project something outside? That means we are dishonest people. And God says, no, you're not supposed to do that. Let your yes be yes, let your no be no, right? Meaning, diplomacy and truth sometimes are kind of fighting. You know what diplomacy is? Diplomacy is basically, yes, sometimes hiding the truth because we don't want to spoil the relationship. But where is the line? There are very interesting quotes, some a little bit derogatory. For example, Winston S. Churchill, the great diplomat from the UK. Diplomacy is the art of telling people to go to hell in such a way that they would ask you for directions, okay? You actually tell them to go to hell, but in such a way, you have put it in such a sugar-coated pearl that they do not know that you are asking them to go to hell, but they even ask you directions for that. That definitely is wrong. But Isaac Newton makes this statement where he says, tact is the knack of making a point without making an enemy. We side with that. That you make a point, but you don't want to make an enemy of the person that you are talking to. If that is where your diplomacy is, then it's okay. But if it is untrue, if it is very dishonest, then Jesus says, no, definitely not. Because we need to be careful here. We cannot just go about alienating and creating enemies of people all the time just because you want to correct them. And that's why Warren Wiersbe, he's a great author, a Christian author. He says, truth without love is brutality. Truth without love is brutality. You just tell the truth, and it's very brutal. It's an honest truth. And love without truth is hypocrisy. Love without truth is hypocrisy. So you have to put them together, but be an honest person, especially in your words. We love people, and we want to be truthful to people, but just put them together in such a way that you will not alienate and create enemies and hurt people, but at the same time, be truthful. Because today we live in a culture where lie is not a problem at all, right? And therefore we even categorize lies into what? Yeah, we categorize them by color. There are black lies, there are white lies. Do you know that? What are black lies? Yeah, black lies are bad, okay? Meaning it's not good. White lies, it doesn't really affect anybody, okay? So every time you don't go to school, that's how you start, right? Start lying, maybe. Since I was suffering from fever, I was not able to come to school. When you were playing, when you woke up late, when your parents had a commitment and they did not want you to go to school on that particular day, but the management is not going to accept that as an excuse. So you start with that. So we are indoctrinated that certain lies are basically okay. We are habituated that way. But Jesus says, be truthful, be honest. And sometimes, honesty, why are we not honest? Why do we tell lies? Have you ever asked the question, why do you tell lies? Why do we tell lies? That's for a selfish reason. We don't want to be, right, we don't want to be penalized. If I tell the truth, then maybe you're going to hate me. I have to face certain consequences, and for that, the easier way out is blurt out a lie, okay? Don't even think about that. But no, you keep on blurting out lies, you will forget what is reality. Do you know that? Yeah. Because truth is easy to remember. Lies are not. Because you have to keep track of lies. You know that? Because you might forget what you said 1 year back if it was a lie, because you might forget what lie you told. But the truth remains the same. Yeah. So, be honest is what Jesus says, and he makes it oversimplified here. Obviously, just like Jesus uses something called hyperbole, exaggeration certain times, he also uses an oversimplification sometimes, okay, to make a point where he says, look at that, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond comes from the evil one. Can you answer everything with an yes or no? Just like a teacher, he went and talked to his students and he said, everything in the world you can just say answer by yes or no. So there is always this one guy in the class who stands up and he says, sir, can I ask you a question? Have you stopped beating your wife? All right. So can he say yes? That means he has been beating his wife. Can he say no? That means he has not stopped beating his wife. And this is basically something called a loaded question. If you know logic, it's called a loaded question, where the question is loaded with a presupposition. Okay, the question is already loaded. It already assumes that the man has been beating the wife, okay, which that person never knows. Okay, so presumption is actually loaded into the question. It already presupposes that the man is married, okay? So these are presuppositions that are already loaded into the question. So Jesus is not talking about that. Obviously, you can use that and say, hey, this is not a possibility. But that question is not a real question. It is a question that is a trick question, basically, a loaded question to confuse the person that has been asked to. But usually, Jesus is saying, be honest with what you say. This is very important. Either to God, even to God, speak the truth. To people making oaths, you don't have to swear, you don't have to bring the Bible, you don't have to swear on someone's grave, you don't have to swear on God himself, because you have no control over any of those things. What you have control over is your own life and your words. If people are not able to trust you because of your words and your life, and what is the point of bringing somebody else? And because that is basically dishonesty. You want to show yourself as a credible person, but you are not. So may God help us that falsity will never be a part of our lives. And he goes on to say, anything beyond this comes from the evil one. This is again a very strong statement where he says, according to the Jewish idea, the evil one is basically Satan himself. If you have a dishonest life, if you are dishonest, dishonesty, he says, falsehood comes from Satan himself. But if you follow Jesus, you are supposed to be a person who's honest, who's supposed to be transparent. And that is why Matthew chapter 5, he would talk about the pureness of heart, meaning that you are the person who you are. You don't hide behind a mask. You don't hide beyond diplomacy. You are a person who you are. You don't put on shows. You understand that? And this is very important. Jesus was like that. And no one can, just think about saying, hey, what is going on in his mind? No. It's all the time. Whatever was going on in his mind, either it was through his actions we understand or through his words we understand. He was not hiding behind anything. May God help us that we will be honest people in life. And then he goes on saying, you have heard, that is verse 38 onward, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. What is Jesus talking about? If the first one is worth of words, each word is worth something. Don't be dishonest. Worth of words. Here he is talking about something else. What is this eye for an eye? Is it a commandment that God gave? If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 19 and 21, you would know that this was a commandment given by God, where he said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, no mercy. This is basically what he says. It sounds very crude, right? It sounds like, maybe he was, just like old people, the olden times, we call them, barbarians, and now we have become civilized. We somehow think that maybe, Jesus is changing all that because earlier, maybe he was not that civilized, and then he became a little bit civilized, and he said, you know what? Yeah, that's too gory. What do you think? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, life for a life. What is that? That is justice. Isn't that justice? Is it justice? What do you think? Is it justice or no? No justice. It is justice. Someone took one person's life, and how can he ever repay back? Nothing. So he has to be punished. Okay? And justice happened because of 2 things. One, you punish the person so that that person will not exploit again. You understand that? The second thing is, through that punishment, other people will fear that and will not do that again. That is why punishment is given. And in the Old Testament, God is talking about that. So he has not changed his stance. He has not changed his ideals. Justice is important. No one should be exploited. If someone is exploiting, and if that exploiter is allowed to go free, that means we are condoning, we are propagating victimization and exploitation. Yes or no? Someone takes something from you and I say, you know what, forgive them. That means that person is going to keep on exploit other people, and someone is still going to lose all the time. So I'm siding with the exploiter and I'm against the victim. So that is not justice. God is always just. But at the same time, Jesus goes on to say something very different here. Why? Has he changed? God has changed. Why? Why is he saying, you know what, if someone slaps you, you turn the other cheek. If someone takes your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Is he not supporting the exploiter here? When God gave these commandments, we need to know it was something called theocracy, where there was no ruling authority separate from the people themselves, okay? So when these laws were given, people governed themselves. You understand that? People governed themselves. And therefore, justice has to be meted out by the people themselves. Today, is justice important, whether we get justice or not, but justice is important. And therefore, every nation will have a constitution, a code of law and things like that, by which people will still be punished. Exploiters are supposed to be punished. So when Jesus is talking, he is in a different scenario now. In the Old Testament, it was theocracy, meaning there was no king, there was no governing body, there was no separate wing to take care of law and order. But when Jesus is talking about this, there is already the Roman law. There is already, just like today we have police, they have prefects, they have other people who would, see to it that the law and order is kept. So when you have a provision by which the law and order is taken care of, you have no right to take law into your own hands. That's basically it. So we're not against the law. If we say, hey, murderer should go free, then we are standing against justice, but we allow the law to take its course where that punished person is going to be punished. But at the same time, what Jesus is trying to say is, do not consider that person your enemy. He or she has to be punished for what they have done, so that equality, so that justice will be meted out. But at the same time, personally, you don't consider that person your enemy. That person is definitely in the wrong. There is no doubt there. If a Jew called another Jew a raka or a fool, in a way of contempt, putting them down, there is the court of law immediately coming into action, and they would be put into prison. You understand that? So exploitation is not going to be condoned. Exploitation is going to be punished. But me as a person who has exploited me, I have got everything back, meaning I have been paid back my due. But at the same time, after that, I can have no enmity. So relationships is what Jesus is talking about, or love is what Jesus talks about. Look at that, because he continues. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Again, this is very surprising, because this is found only in the Old Testament. Leviticus chapter 9, you would find 19 and 18. God always gave this commandment where he said, love your neighbors. He never said, hate your enemies. But somehow this is an addition that these Pharisees had added. Okay, love your neighbors and hate your enemies. That is definitely not there in the Bible, okay? So this is an addition. So many people are saying that. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. We are not saying victimization is right. We're not saying God is standing for the exploiter. What we are saying, victims need to be paid back by the exploiter as the law finds it right. But at the same time, me as a person, if the other person has exploited me, I should find it in my heart that I would be able to love. So he is talking about this aspect of love. I would call it the lens of love. If I call that the worth of words, this is going to be, what length would you go at? People say that, right? I would go to any length to do something. It is hurting, it is hurtful that, forgiving people who have really broken you down and broken your lives down. It's really, really difficult, but at least considering them as human beings, not considering them as enemies is what Jesus says. Why do we have to do that? But I tell you, love your enemies, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. It's like this. If someone does something against me, they are my enemies. But if I allow somebody to do something against me, that makes it easier for me to, you understand that? If somebody slaps you, that means I'm very angry because that person slapped me. And Jesus says, you turn your other cheek, and now they slap you again, but they slap you because, you allow them to slap you. And now, you cannot blame the other person saying, it's all their mistake. Jesus is saying, see, that's the way it is, just the way God is. We hurt him, but at the same time, he becomes vulnerable so that it becomes easier for us to forgive. This is what is very important. And that is why Jesus says, if someone, forces you to walk a mile, what do? You walk 2 miles along with them, where you can always say, hey, it's not you. I did it. 2 miles. So I have no anger against you. You understand that? Someone is taking your shirt and you say, I'm very generous today. Take the coat as well. That means I don't consider the other person an enemy. I have overpowered that person's hate with my love. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Meaning everybody does that. So what is special in you following me? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So perfection is not condoning injustice. It is condemning injustice. It is knowing that they will be punished, and therefore the scales have to be evened out. But at the same time, people who are exploiters and we have become victims, we have it in our heart to follow God and therefore be perfect like him, where we become vulnerable by our own choice, not because we are forced to. You understand that? And that is the idea of the book of Revelation as well. And that is why a lot of people don't we don't read the book of Revelation. And if at all we read, you read it in our own way. If you read it rightly, you would not find it very appealing. Even yesterday we had a passage where Jesus would say, or God would say to the people, Those who will get killed, they will get killed. Those who will be taken captives, they will be captives. They will be taken captives. But don't you worry, because, you have eternity. That is very consoling. Because for us, it's always the other way around. If God is for me, who can stand against me? You come against me with a sword, He will come against you with an AK-47. Okay? I heard a preacher say that. Jesus has upgraded Himself now. If you think that He is the person who has been having a staff in His hands, that's 2,000 years back. He has upgraded Himself. You come against me with a sword, He will come against you with an AK-47. So very satisfying for us. But that is not Jesus. He says, He causes His sun, look at that, verse 45, He causes His sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's His. The sun is His, right? But He makes it shine on the evil and the good, because He is giving time for the evil to change. He is not considering the evil people His enemies. So may God help us that we will have that perfection instead of always thinking that God is on our side and He's going to fight all my enemies, okay? So we need to scrap all of those things out of our, ideology and theology, that we can not have enemies. People can consider us their enemies, but we can never consider anybody our enemy, because God never considers anybody His enemy. People can stand against Him, but He never ever stands against them. If we follow Jesus, we are supposed to be that. So, the first one is worth of words, between you and God, between you and people. Oaths, vows, He says, be honest, there is worth in your words. Length of love. To what lengths would you go to show that you are following Jesus? And to what lengths would you go to show that you are a loving person, and therefore, maybe through that they will also understand their mistake? And chapter 6, verses 1 to 8, I will just read it. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. He is saying, you have to be righteous. This has definitely been taught, because the salt and the light, when Jesus said you are the salt and the light, He was actually talking about how we need to be doing good deeds which will glorify Him. So righteousness, doing good deeds, is essential part of following Jesus. But at the same time, do not practice it in front of others. So, you are a good person, but you don't flaunt, you don't boast, you don't take a selfie, because that's what we are, right? So you help, and please give a smile, right? I'll put it on my Facebook because I gave you 100 rupees. Celebrities do that. Celebrities have always done that, okay? I've seen, behind the scene videos where, someone is really like hugging somebody, right? Taking a photograph, very poor, very, very dirty clothes, and this is a politician, hugging them and taking a photograph. But the next moment, you get a sanitizer, you wipe yourself and, put a perfume maybe. Yeah? That is celebrities, okay? Anybody who always has to say, well, peace, right? Everybody has to say that. Do you know that? Anything that you win, any politician, any celebrity always has to come and say, you know what? Peace. But how peaceful they are, what peace they bring to people, that is celebrities. Let's not become that. Let's not become that Christian celebrity who always, does things not because we love people, but because we love ourselves. That's the difference. We love other people, and therefore we need to give. But certain times we give because we have a love for ourselves. We want other people to really see that we are very, very generous. I told you, someone that I've known for quite some time, but we lost touch. This person had put it on Facebook, calling it an angelic mission, going and giving blankets to people on the streets. It's a good thing. It's a good initiative. But you don't consider yourself to be an angel and call it an angelic mission. And every time you give a blanket to somebody, you click a picture and put it on Facebook, and everybody is like, wow, that is amazing. You are very Christ-like. Christ was not that. Whenever He healed people, He told them, don't say anything to anybody, because that's a big secret, Yeah. Do you know that? He said, go to show yourself to the priest, and then just go home to your family and resume your work. And He says, don't say to anybody. But for us, no, we have to flaunt ourselves, right? And we have to, some kind of a miracle. It might not even be a miracle. And you have to just wait for that particular, moment to happen. Keep the video camera in your hands and just focus on that. And then, some kind of a little twitch that happens in your leg, that's a miracle. And you have to post it on Facebook and everybody is following. You know what? God is doing amazing things to you, through you, right? You are a powerful man of God. Jesus says, let your righteousness never be in public. And when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, right? Because that he calls it hypocrisy. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward. But when you do, when you give, let your left hand not know what your right hand is doing. This is what God wants. Not only in righteousness, he goes on, look at verse 5. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. So look at that. If you are a righteous person and you want to show other people that you're a righteous person, you are not a righteous person in the eyes of God. You are a hypocrite. And praying is good. Obviously, it's a relationship with God. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. So there is a hypocrisy in prayer where you pray just because everybody is going to say, hey, that's a very godly person. Pray. Jesus says, look at that. And they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. But when you go to pray, go into your room, close the door and pray to your Father. It's your relationship with God. It's personal. It is not for you to publicize, to gain some kind of a popularity for your own self. It is for you. It is between you and God. Is it essential? It is essential. No doubts there. But do it not for publicizing and putting yourself above other people, not to push yourself up in the ladder of popularity, but because the relationship is important. Otherwise, you do the right thing for the wrong reason. Jesus would call it hypocrisy. Righteousness, good deeds, good thing. Don't do it for the wrong motives. Prayer, good thing. Don't do it for the wrong motives. And he would continue, and you don't babble like the pagans, he says. Verse 7, when you pray, do not keep on babbling, because people think that they will be heard because of their many words. Your prayer is not some kind of a thesis. You understand that? Yeah, I have to use the right words. Is the comma there? Is the punctuation right? Is the structure right? Prayer is not that. Prayer is your relationship with God. And it's supposed to be the most informal thing. You understand that? So there is no need of... That is why even language is not even needed. Okay? Sometimes you just, babble, but that's okay. But here he is talking about a deliberate kind of a thing where they think it's flowery language that they're using it for God, because certain people are amazed by that, amused by that. I get amused. People get amazed by that, right? Where you have to show yourself how well you can pray because your words are all flowery. You pick out verses from here and there and everywhere. And then people say, he knows the Bible. You understand that? Yeah, that's not how you show your knowledge of the Bible, by bringing all kinds of scripture into the, prayer. It's that is your personal relationship with him. Fasting. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. Again, look at the word, hypocrisy. What is fasting? What's fasting? Not eating. Not eating non-veg. Yeah, we have a lot of fasting. Do you know that? Some people say, I fasted 3 days, okay? What did you eat or what didn't you eat? You know what? That's juice fast, okay? Basically, I drink only juice. I will not drink, I will not have anything else, okay? And there is no water fasting, only food fast, only water fasting, only juice fasting, one day, one meal skipping fasting. We have, no idea at all, okay? So many fasting. Movie fasting. What is that? You watch only movies? Oh, not watching TV. Okay. Oh, I did not know that. Thank you. So, supposedly that happens. I have no idea. For this week, I will not watch television. Somehow it is going to benefit God. This week, I'm not going to eat non-veg because it's going to benefit God. I have no idea because we have not killed animals and maybe, we are helping the creation. Fasting is not any of those things. Fasting is supposed to be a contrition of heart where I am torn by the sins that I have done. I understand I need to be humble. I cry out to God with sincere tears. And that is why in the Old Testament, anytime they fasted, they would always, even if they were kings, they will disrobe those royal robes. They will put on a sackcloth. They will take this ash and sand and mud and put it on themselves and sit crying, saying, Lord, I have done something wrong. If that is what you do, you are fasting. If you don't do that, you don't have to cry all the time. When you feel like crying, you have to, right? Obviously, fasting is like this. I can never go and say, fast and pray. It's like, because when Jesus was asked the question, people asked him, hey, why are your disciples not fasting? Jesus said, because the groom is with them. I'm with them. They are happy now. You understand that? So, fasting is always associated with sadness, broken heart. You understand that? And I cannot go and suggest saying, hey, please today, it's been a very long time since you had a broken heart today. Please have a broken heart. Please go and cry today. We cannot have time for, specifically, we cannot tailor-make time saying, hey, I'm going to laugh today. Through the day, I'm going to laugh. It's been a long time since I did that. The same way, you cannot go and say, I'm going to cry today, 3 days. It's been a long time. Tear glands have to work, right? Fasting is not that. Fasting is that you are utterly broken. Maybe you go through a situation like that, where at that point of time, King David had something like that. He had done something wrong. He had, committed adultery with Bathsheba, and the child is born, and the child is about to die, and he is heartbroken. He says, please don't bring me any food or anything because I'm heartbroken. You understand that? That is not someone who taught him, hey, child is dying, please be heartbroken. No. You understand that? That is something that happens. And all of us, maybe in our own lives, when you go through some tough things, where you will close your doors and say, I don't want to come out at all. I just want to spend time with God. I want to just cry out because I don't feel like eating. I don't feel like drinking anything. I don't feel like meeting people. If that happens, that is true fast. If you pre-plan it, just think about that. If you pre-plan that you're going to cry that day, also pre-plan that sometimes you're going to laugh. Okay? 3 days, I'm going to cry. Maybe the next week, make a plan. 3 days, I'm going to laugh. I'm making it humorous, but this is the point here. Why are people doing this? It's instead of it being a relationship with God, it has become a way by which they glorify themselves. Jesus says, but when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, because this is something called a ritual fasting that a lot of Jews were doing. And maybe once a week or so, they have to fast and they have to show everybody they are very spiritual. So supposedly, usually every day they have to put oil on their heads, okay, usually. And on fasting days, they will not, because they have to show that they are fasting. And usually they wash their faces, and during fasting they don't, okay? Because somehow we have no idea. Because there should be a kind of a pointer. I have fasted, you know that, right? So I have to put on a notice saying, 3-day fasting. It's always like that, 3 day or 7 day or 21 day or 40 day. It doesn't have to be publicized. No one ever needs to know that. We have made it very synonymous with what we call in Tamil. I didn't get an English word for that. Maybe penance would be a word for that. Davam. You understand that? The more I sit and, make penance, somehow special powers I will get from God. I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm going to just not eat that much. Why? Because seeing that, God is going to give me some. Yeah, that's one way of becoming superhuman. Okay? Spider bites you, that is another one. Okay? You go into a cave, and you become superhuman, some kind of magical power. I fasted 40 days. You know what? Receive the power of God. That is not how it works. You understand that? He says, that is called hypocrisy. So, subdual of self, I call it. Worth of words, vow and oaths, right? Then we talked about lens of love, where justice needs to be done, but I don't consider anybody an enemy. I go the extra mile, show my love, and then I call this subdual of the self. There is always this aspect, this temptation of putting myself above other people. But Jesus says, don't. Even in your righteousness, even in your prayer, even in your relationship with God and your fasting, otherwise you will become a hypocrite. It is for you, it's between you and God. So may God help us that these are the characteristics of Jesus which will come true in our own lives. Let's bow down our heads and look to the Lord in prayer.